Good evening. Welcome. Thank you for joining us this evening for the Fall 2022 Gale Family Foundation Lecture. My name is Jonathan Kaplan, and I am the director of the Schusterman Center for Jewish Studies here at the University of Texas at Austin. Before I introduce our speaker for this evening, I would like to extend my thanks to the sponsor of tonight's event, the Gale Family Foundation. Along with the Schusterman Family Philanthropies, the Gale Family Foundation has helped to make Jewish studies not only a success here at UT Austin, but also a pioneer in the field. The Gale Family Foundation Annual Lecture Series is an event that predates and helped to sow the seeds for the establishment of a Center for Jewish Studies here at UT. This lecture series has brought leading scholars in Jewish studies, commentators, writers, and artists to the 40 acres. These lectures introduce undergraduate and graduate students, faculty from across campus, and broad off-campus audiences to the world of Jewish studies. Most recently, Deborah Lipschits, Yossi Klein Halevi, Amy Jill Levine, Barbara Kirschenblatt-Gimblett, Anthea Butler, and Doris Bergen have been Gale lecturers. Along with the lecture series, the Gale Family Foundation has helped to support one of the main programmatic and research focuses of the center, the Jewish Life in the Americas initiative, through endowments in Jewish arts and culture and North American Jewish life. The Gale Collaborative on Jewish Life in the Americas is a research colloquium directed by Dr. Naomi Lindstrom that facilitates shared projects for scholars from Canada, the United States, Mexico, Argentina, and Israel. As I begin tonight, I would like to thank the staff of the Schusterman Center, Administrative Associate Karen Marco, and the center's Assistant Director, Dr. Samantha Pickett, for their work in putting on tonight's event. Our speaker for this evening, Dr. Oded Lipschits, is an eminent professor in the Department of Archaeology and Ancient Near Eastern Studies at Tel Aviv University. Professor Lipschits serves as the director of the Sonia and Marco Nadler Institute of Archaeology there. He is incumbent of the Austria Chair of the Archaeology of the Land of Israel in the Biblical Period and heads the Ancient Israel Studies MA program within the Department of Archaeology and Ancient Near Eastern Cultures at Tel Aviv University. Professor Lipschits is the laureate of the Emmett Prize in the field of archaeology for the year 2022. The Emmett Prize, which may not be known to most Americans, is an Israeli prize awarded annually for excellence in academic and professional achievements that have far-reaching influence and make a significant contribution to society. Together with his colleagues, Dr. Lipschits has directed several archaeological excavations, including Ramat Rachel near Jerusalem, Tel Azekah currently, and Tel Motza as well currently. He's credited with authoring and co-authoring over a dozen books, which many students in my class have read, some of them at least, and several hundred articles, and has organized and lectured in over 200 local and international conferences worldwide. Born in Jerusalem, Professor Lipschits is an expert on the archaeology and the ancient history of the city. I'm delighted to welcome him this evening as the Fall 2022 Gale Family Foundation Lecturer and to share with us this lecture, New Light on the Archaeology of Jerusalem in the 7th Century BCE. Please join me in welcoming Professor Lipschits.
Thank you, Jonathan. I would like to thank Professor Jonathan Kaplan for inviting me to this lecture and to Karen Marco for the great help in organizing this, and of course, the Gale Family Foundation for supporting this lecture. In this lecture tonight, I want to show you that archaeology is not only great fun. And by the way, you're all invited to join our excavation, go to our projects, Facebook and website, and you can join us every summer with more than 100 of people coming from all over the world, from the age of 7 to 87. It's usually in the summer. But archaeology is the most important historical and archaeological tool in learning the history of the ancient past, especially the biblical period. And as I'll try to show you, the change that we have only in the last few years in understanding the maybe most important period in biblical times is unbelievable. Every time that we go to the field, we have no clue what we're going to find. And in the last few years, we had a lot of luck to find things that change our perspective on the history. So I will start a little bit with explaining what we knew before and what's important of these things. And then I'll show you some of our excavation. And believe me that we have so many finds and so many excavations that I just cannot show you today, that you'll see archaeology is really fun, but it's also a very important tool. So, how do we reconstruct the ancient history of the biblical period? What is the method by which it is possible to get a reliable picture of the ancient past of the biblical period in general and the days of the First Temple period in particular? We have three main sources at our disposal: ancient inscriptions, the biblical description, and the archaeological findings. Seemingly, everything is simple, and with proper historical research, we can get a reliable picture, but things are not that simple. On the one hand, we have quite a lot of historical sources, both Assyrian and Babylonian sources and inscriptions, even if not many, that were found throughout the Levant in general, and in some cases also they were found in Israel. The problem is that these inscriptions do not cover a continuum of time, but rather illuminate history with focusing lighting when between the spots of lights, there are also many completely dark periods of time. The result is that it is impossible to reconstruct a continuous historical picture on the basis of these inscriptions. Moreover, these inscriptions mostly deal with the history from the side of the great empires, and the place that Judah has in them is quite limited, so that in fact the historical darkness is even greater. The historical reconstruction based on these inscriptions resembles a dark street with several lanterns and irregular distances. You can see the general direction, but it's hard to see the details. On the other hand, there is the biblical description, mainly I'm talking about the historiographical books, such as Samuel, these are still the lights, yes, such as Samuel, King, Ezra, Nehemiah, and Chronicles. Apparently, in these books, a continuous historical picture is described, and it is possible to accept the biblical description as it is and reconstruct history on its basis. Many people and many scholars are simply doing it. But this description is problematic in many respects for the reconstruction of the historical picture, since, on the one hand, the biblical history story of the history of the kingdom of Judah describe the point of view of the Jerusalem elite, what they knew, what they wanted to tell, and what served its political, religious, and economic interests. This is not a historical document written with the aim of reflecting reality as it was, but it is an ideological document that seeks to use history to convey the message to the generation to whom the text was written in ancient times, and we shouldn't be offended, but this text was not aimed to us. And whoever wrote it didn't think about us. The audience for whom these historical descriptions were aimed knew the history and understood from the text what messages are conveyed to them through these texts. Therefore, when we read the biblical text, we should not expect an accurate historical description, but we should try to understand the message, to understand what the authors wanted to tell their contemporaries, and what these people in this time understood from the text they read, without thinking that the exact history is described in front of them in this text. This is The reason why the biblical description expands on focused events to which it devoted great importance, such as 2 complete chapters, for example, on the cultic reform carried out by King Josiah, probably in the period exactly when this text was written. And on the other hand, it totally removes from history King Manasseh. You will hear a lot the name King Manasseh today, who reigned in Judah for 55 years, more than any other king in the history of the kingdom of Judah. The reason for this is mainly because, in the opinion of the author of the biblical description, Manasseh was a sinful king who was not like him in the entire history of Judah. Therefore, apart from the description of his sins, which according to the biblical description were the direct cause of the destruction of the kingdom that was 75 years after his death, yes? Nothing that happened during his long reign is described in the book of Kings. From the Assyrian inscriptions, we know that many things happened during the period when Manasseh ruled in Judah, and you will see so many finds from this period of rule. Since the days of the king Manasseh coincide with the height of Assyrian control over the entire ancient world, and Judah was part of the Assyrian Empire. It took part in Assyrian military campaigns. Judah paid taxes to the Assyrian Empire, benefited from the trade that developed throughout the empire, recovered from the heavy destruction which took place during Sennacherib campaign in 701 BCE against Hezekiah, the king of Judah in this time, and went through a period of great prosperity. You will see in the coming minutes the amazing discovery that we have from this exact period that was totally ignored by the biblical writer. These gaps between the focus of the historical description in the book of Kings on central events and the ignoring of long periods exist throughout the book. And thus, for example, we know nothing about what happened during the long reign of King Hezekiah, except for the event surrounding the Assyrian campaign of 701 BCE, and this despite the fact that Hezekiah reigned for many years before and after this military campaign. We also know nothing about the first 18 years of King Josiah until he was already 26 years old and made his cultic reform. And we also do not know what happened in the next and last 13 years of his reign between the cultic reform conducted in 622 BCE and his death in 609 BCE. Moreover, biblical descriptions focused on the events and judge the kings from the point of view chosen by the biblical historiographers. They condemned kings who submitted to the foreign empire, such as Ahaz, and praised kings who rebelled against empire, such as Hezekiah and Josiah, even though, in the case of King Hezekiah, this rebellion resulted in a terrible disaster and destruction caused by the campaign of Sennacherib, king of Assyria, who went out against Judah, and in the case of Josiah, this led to the death of the king and the rapid process of deterioration towards the final destruction of the kingdom. Even the archaeological source, which is apparently scientific and reliable, is very problematic in terms of our ability to reconstruct long historical processes, such as the history of Judah during the 7th century BCE. In the archaeological excavation, it is relatively easy to locate layers of destruction. Archaeologists love destructions. The landlines, the abnormal accumulation of the findings, and the layers of burned material are conspicuous and clearly separate the layer of the settlement above the layer of destruction, which represent the renewal of the settlement afterwards, and the layer of the settlement that was buried under the layer of destruction. The noticeable differences that usually exist between the material culture above the layer of destruction and the material culture below it makes it possible to separate these two different phases with relatively ease. Following this, the methodological processing of the findings, especially the pottery, as you see here, allows for a relative reasonable archaeological dating of the destruction and the material culture buried beneath it. Against this background, the historical method comes into action in an attempt to associate the destruction with known historical events. This is the way also to determine an exact historical date for the destruction and the material culture that was buried under it. If we will have time at the end, I will tell you about one of our great contributions to science and to archaeology with the publication of the research of paleomagnetic study of well-known and dated destruction layers, and this is the future of archaeology of what we're doing, and connect to what we'll speak about today. Faced with the ability of archaeological research to locate destruction layers, and despite the existing problem in describing them and associating them with historical events, the even more difficult problem of archaeological research is to locate the beginning of layers and to establish their duration before the last stage of their existence that is relevant. And we can find it really clearly in destruction layers and in archaeology. Archaeological research has a difficult problem with settlement layers that exist for many tens and hundreds of years, because in the end, what is found in the excavation is the last stage of these layers. Most of the findings from the early stages of these layers were cleaned, evacuated, and moved during the tens and hundreds of years that humans continued to live, and only if by chance we find garbage pits or cleaning and clearing layers from these stages, then it is possible to stand for the time and characteristics of the ancient settlement. So, after presenting the sources for reconstructing the ancient biblical history, I would like to raise the question again. How do we reconstruct the history of the biblical period? What is the method by which it is possible to get a reliable picture of the ancient past, of the biblical period in general, and the days of the first temple in particular? The method that I'm using, called the Tel Aviv School, in reconstructing the ancient history of the biblical period, and we seek to create 3 parallel historical images from the sources available to us: the biblical image, the archaeological image, and the image from the other historical sources. Each of these images is created independently of the other images. Each of these images is created without taking the other images, which are based on other sources and is not influenced by it. That is, we try not to come with expectations from the reading of the Bible to and interpret with it the archaeological finds with the help of this description. And we do not come with thoughts about layers of destruction and try to read the biblical description in light of this. Only when 3 independent historical images are received, and with an awareness of the problem in each image, do we try to compare the images and check where they match and where one image can be preferred over the other in order to create the most balanced and realistic historical picture of the defined period of time in the ancient world. Against this background, it is possible to present the 7th century, BCE of course, in the history of Judah. This century, which is the last century in the history of Judah before the destruction, is caught between a series of historically, archaeologically, and biblically documented destructions. So it's a very well present in archaeology, which make it well distinguished and well differentiated from what was before it and what came after it. During the reign of the great Assyrian king, Tiglath-Pileser III, Assyria spread rapidly throughout the Levant, conquered large areas, destroyed the kingdoms that had existed throughout the region for hundreds of years, exiled large populations to the other side of the empire, and founded a series of provinces throughout the area that were under the direct rule of Assyrian officials. This process continued into the 7th century BCE, when Assyria took over all the kingdoms of the ancient world and founded for the first time in history, a world in which there is only one power, superpower, that rules the entire ancient world. We call it Age of Empires. And also the period, we call it Pax Assyriaca in Greek, the Assyrian peace. The period of the Assyrian when they rule the world and no one can stand against their power. A period of great prosperity began. It makes me always very sad because when people can, they waste the money on fortifications, wars, destructions. And when they cannot, they spend it on other things. So, because those who lived at that time had no other option but to take part in the policies of the empire in the direction of trade in all of the empire, development and prosperity, without the possibility of investing it in fortifications, army, and other things. How does it reflect, or how does it relate to the topic of today's lecture? In 732 BCE, the Assyrians destroyed the great Aram-Damascus kingdom in central Syria, and at the same time, they also destroyed many sites in the north of the kingdom of Israel, such as Chatzor and Megiddo. The Assyrians expelled large part of the population of the kingdom of Israel and emptied large areas of their inhabitants. They turned all the northern territories of the kingdom of Israel to provinces that were directly controlled by Assyrian officials. At that time, King Ahaz, King Ahaz is before. At that time, King Ahaz of Judah acted very wisely, and he stood before the king of Assyria in Damascus when he destroyed Tiglath-Pileser III, Aram Damascus. King Ahaz came to him, surrendered to him, and turned Judah into a vassal kingdom of the Assyrian Empire. This remained the case for about 100 years, that Judah was a loyal vassal kingdom. In 722, the Assyrians destroyed the area of Samaria, including the capital city of the King of Israel, and ended the 200 years of existence of the Kingdom of Israel. Then, in 701, the Assyrians embarked on a great campaign against King Hezekiah of Judah and against a coalition of kings who joined him. They destroyed large part of the lowland and other areas of Judah, but failed to destroy Jerusalem. King Hezekiah of Judah surrendered to them, paid a heavy tribute and taxes, and Judah continued to be a loyal vassal kingdom to Assyria for the next 70 years, which include mainly the years of the 7th century that we're going to talk, and the time when King Manasseh ruled in the kingdom. Like other kingdoms in the peripheral regions of the empire who submitted to Assyrian demands, the ruling Judean elite were allowed to remain in power and were granted autonomy. In exchange, the Assyrians imposed vassal obligations on Judah, including the payment of the annual tribute, so it was only material goods but also labor, sending intelligence reports and information about political and military matters in the area, taking part in the Assyrian military campaigns, supplied the Assyrian army during its battles, etc. This was the Assyrian case with every kingdom that was surrendered to them. And we know it. But no one asked until now, okay, when and where the Assyrians built the center near Jerusalem? How did they rule Jerusalem in this time? How the kings, Ahaz, Hezekiah, Manasseh, how they acted and interact with the Assyrian Empire? For an archaeological as well as from historical point of view, the beginning of the 7th century BCE is clear and present in archaeological facts and includes a whole series of destructions, both in Judah and the entire region around. All this is from the upper side of the 7th century, who is also sealed from the lower side by the destruction of the Babylonians, who destroyed Jerusalem and other cities in Judah in 586 BCE. That is, even from the lower side of the 7th century BCE, it is well bounded and defined by destructions. Even more than that, Judah came under the Assyrian yoke and became an Assyrian vassal kingdom as early as 732 BCE. This historical reality caused major changes in the material culture, in the administration, and in the economy of Judah, which are also evident and expressed in archaeological research. The administration and economy in Judah underwent rapid changes as Judah was required to pay high taxes to the empire. And for this purpose, the empire demanded to know exactly how much the kingdom of Judah was producing in order to know exactly how much they could take. Moreover, the Assyrian Empire demanded to improve the production of agriculture product, and they can get more. This is the idea. The administration and the economy of Judah underwent rapid changes, and it was amazingly changed in this time. And for example, therefore, in this period of time, the economy had to be matured and developed and also improved. And this is the first time, for example, that in Judah we have weights. This is weights with fixed value. Every weight of 1 shekel, this is the original shekel, is 11.7 gram. And if we have 5 shekel, which is the Egyptian numbers over there, so it's 5 times 11.7 gram. And even if we found in excavation 1 weight that someone had drilled a hole below it, and we found a piece of lead inside it that it made it 17 gram. So it's a cheat, to cheat. But if someone is cheating, it means that someone is inspecting, and you have someone to cheat. And it means that you have a growing up economy. The production of the jars that were filled with olive oil and wine became mass production for the first time, and the jars became standardized. Every jar is between 37 and 42 liters, everyone. And it became uniform in its context, which didn't exist before. Some of these jars were marked with stamp impressions. You see, the jars are maybe different in size during the period, but all of them are the same content, 37 to 42 liters, and you can see it from all over, from the 7th century, 6th century, 5th century, and in many of them, we have stamp impressions. And these stamp impressions are with the symbol of the king. In all of them, in the Hebrew script, this is a script that the Bible was written, yeah? And in the upper part, you have Lamelech, belonging to the king, so the king had the responsibility for it, and below you have 4 names of different kings' royal estates that supplied the liquids for this thing. So we have these royal stamp impressions from the time of King Hezekiah and then Manasseh, and we have these stamp impressions from the time of King Josiah, which are the rosette. And all this is a clear indication for what happened to the economy during this time. Now, if everything is so clear and so understandable, and it happened until the time of the destruction of the first temple period, so why we have such a big problem with understanding the history of Judah in the time of when the Assyrians ruled and everything happened in this time? So, this period has its own special problems, and the existing new discovering that illuminate it in a new and really unexpected light will shed a lot of new things about it. And this is because the problems of ancient history clustered together in this period, which is apparently known and understood and distort the historical picture without scholars realizing how distorted the picture is, since the special problem with the history of Jerusalem is that everything increases tens of times when you get to Jerusalem. Everything becomes more problematic when you get to Jerusalem, and more religiously and emotionally charged. The biblical sources become more problematic, selectively illuminates periods and kings and darkens other periods, ignores the presence of the empires in Judah in general and in Jerusalem in particular, condemns kings who surrender to the empires and cooperate with them, and magnified kings who rebelled like Hezekiah and Josiah, and in contrast raised great and powerful kings like Manasseh. The problem is that archaeologists, consciously or unconsciously, follow the biblical description and interpret their findings in its light of this biblical description, and historians, taking these finds of the archaeologists and reconstruct the historical reality accordingly to the biblical and then to the archaeological interpretation, base their reconstruction on archaeologists who interpret the findings according to the biblical source, and in fact provide a basis for the circle that feeds itself in the continuation of the biblical interpretation, and then it feeds archaeological interpretation and historical interpretation. Because of this, the entire historical picture that was reconstructed until recently described the reign of Hezekiah, Manasseh, and Josiah without considering the Assyrian presence in Judah and the fact that Judah was a vassal kingdom. Paid taxes, was bound by loyalty and had a permanent presence of officials and an Assyrian army that watched over the kings of Judah and took care of Assyrian interests. Because the Bible ignored the Assyrian presence and the Assyrian rule, and history of Judah had also been reconstructed in this way, and all the finds discovered in excavations all over Judah have been studied as if they had nothing to do with the Assyrian presence in Judah. Only in the last years, we put a mirror, we find it. And then we put a mirror in front of the historical events, and everything changed. Everything changed when we excavate this wonderful site of Ramat Rachel. And then when we continue and we dug and understood the meaning of the administrative center nearby in Mordot Arnona, and this is only because the American moved the embassy to Jerusalem, so some finds on the way to the new embassy in Jerusalem, and until we found this amazing villa in Armon HaNatziv, just above the city of David, by accident, and until the building that we excavated in the Givati parking lot just near the temple in Jerusalem, and suddenly the combination of these four excavations put a mirror in front of us and forced us to understand what a great change happened in Judah when the Assyrians came to the area. So let's start dealing with the archaeological part of this lecture. Ramat Rachel was located on a ridge only 3-4 kilometers, 2 miles to the south of Jerusalem, just 2 miles to the north of Bethlehem, on the main road leading from the south to the north. And just below Ramat Rachel, we have the amazing Rephaim Valley, which is the valley of the king. In biblical time, this is one of the richest valleys around Jerusalem, and this is the breadbasket of Jerusalem in many periods. And nearby, we have the Rephaim Valley, which is the connection between Ramat Rachel and Jerusalem. Now, Ramat Rachel was the center of Judahite administration under Assyrian and then Babylonian and then Persian rule, and then even afterwards with the Ptolemaic and Seleucid rule until the Maccabees revolt. So for 600 years, this was the center of imperial rule over Judah. And we cannot understand anymore the history of Judah in the first and second temple periods without understanding this place, or the important place of Ramat Rachel in the history. But the site was never mentioned by the Bible.
Everybody in Jerusalem, they knew the place. Maybe they visited the place as well. We have some indications for big celebrations that were there. But no one is mentioned because officially the people in Jerusalem are ignoring everything that connects to the foreign rule in Jerusalem. But the foreign people were here. The Assyrians always had a kind named Kepu, who was the observer. And he was here, and he observed the kings from very near. Assyrians were wise. They didn't put the center in Jerusalem. They put it very close to. So when we understood what we have in this place, we came to excavate it. And what we have there is monumental architecture that when we excavated it, we thought that there is no one, it's unique only to the place of Ramat Rachel. Now we know that everywhere where the Assyrians came, this was a symbol of the presence in Judah, these proto-early capitals. And not only this, we have these window balustrades that we knew that they should exist. But the only place where we found them is here in Ramat Rachel. And it's hard stone, well decorated, highly technical development. And it created a window balustrade that we knew that exists because of these ivory models of the woman in the window. And always when we have the woman in the window, this is the window. But the Ramat Rachel is the only place, or the first place. Now we have two more places that we excavated with these actual window balustrades that we know how these windows were built. But one more thing. Ramat Rachel is the capital of the stamped jars. And I'm talking about hundreds and hundreds and hundreds of jars that they brought to Ramat Rachel. And of course, what we find in excavations is only the jars that are broken, because the complete jars continue to roll, around. Hundreds and hundreds of jars came to Ramat Rachel, and we can even try to evaluate how much money Judah paid as taxes every year, because in every time of the circle, we found about 500 jars in the circle. And 500 jars of about 40 liters, it means 20,000 liters of olive oil. A good liter of olive oil costs something like $10. This is what Judah paid. That's it. And every year, we can see how it rolled. So all in all, $200,000? Okay. Maybe not a lot in American money, not even in Israeli money, but probably in the biblical period, it was a lot. And this is what Assyria could get from Judah. So we found hundreds of stamped jar handles in Ramat Rachel from the time of King Hezekiah, and with a symbol, and then from the time of King Josiah, and then from the Persian period, because Judah continued to pay taxes even after the destruction of Jerusalem, even after the temple was not there anymore, even when the king in Jerusalem was not there anymore. The Assyrian and the Babylonian and the Persian, they wanted their money. And this was what Ramat Rachel, this center, should have. So we excavated the place. I spent there 10 years. We excavated there for 6 years, every year with different color, with many, many students from all over the world. We excavate all over the site, and the interpretation of the find leading us to understand how important Ramat Rachel was in the history of Judah as the host of the foreign presence in the place. And it was during the Assyrian time, during the Babylonian time, during the Persian time, all along the history. But mainly what I want to show you is what happened during the Assyrian and Babylonian time when this amazing palace was built. And it's not, we reconstructed it according to what we actually found. It's not, our imagination. And it was an amazing place with all these proto-early capitals all over, with these, pyramids on the roofs. They built everything on a step that they cut in the cliff, so people could see this cut, from all over in the area of Jerusalem. And above this cliff, they built this structure. They built it east-west directly in order to show how they control the nature and not building it according to the shape of the natural hill. And it's not only the luxury building and not only the amazing architectural element, but also the garden that was built around it. Now imagine, in the middle of the desert around Jerusalem, not only this amazing palace, but also the garden that was built around it. And we excavated something like 10 tennis courts, the size of this part of the garden. When in all this area that can be watched from Jerusalem, from Bethlehem, from the people who are coming from east, from west to east, they just removed all the hard rock, used it probably for building, and created a surface like a tennis court with a chalky, soft rock. And above it, they put 1/2 meter of chocolate-like soil they brought from the valley. And it's a soil clean of any sherd, of any, you can just put plants in it and start gardening it. It's really gardening soil. And inside this garden, they built pools and they built tunnels and channels, because in garden, you don't see only the green thing and you don't smell the flowers, you should also hear the sound of water. So you have here places that they can block and open in order to hear the sound of the water. You have huge tunnel leading from water from here to there, pools, huge pools. This is one corner of one of the pools. And they created a garden. Now, 1 minute about gardens. Garden, coming from the Hebrew word to guard, to keep, to watch. And garden in the ancient East were all guarded by walls. Even the garden that you can think about it in Genesis is a garden that they have one master. It was surrounded with wall, and the master can decide who will be inside it and who will be outside it. You know what garden I'm talking. And this garden have a very luxury plants in it, inside it. And in the Assyrian, Babylonian, Persian tradition, they try to use garden in order to see how they are controlling the nature. So they bring trees and bushes and flowers from all over the empire. They had good gardeners who knew how to acclimate them and make them work, blooming in these other places. And this is why also when we're coming to the Persian period, with the garden in Ramat Rachel, in Persian, garden is pardes. This is the Persian word pardes. And when Greeks decided to translate the Bible into Greek, and they had the story of the Garden of Eden in the book of Genesis, they decided to call it paradise. And until now, paradise, is the Garden of Eden. And I think that we are the only archaeologists that actually excavate paradise. And we have this amazing garden in Ramat Rachel. And we ask ourselves, what's it like in the Assyrian, Babylonian garden that they have plants and bushes and trees from all over the world? Because we see how the Assyrian gardens were, and we see that they had the same elements in the garden. These Assyrian gardens, you see them, and they have proteolic capitals, they have these pyramid-shaped stones, they have the same structure as we have in Ramat Rachel in our garden. But also we know that in this garden they had many, many trees from all over the world. So we ask ourselves, is it the same in the garden that we had in Ramat Rachel? We tried to check the land, we tried everything, and then we had an idea. Pollen is this powder of the flowers that some of us don't like it so much in the spring. And we have an expert who knows how to recognize pollen, because pollen is different from every flower to flower. And we can just analyze it and see which pollen is coming from which trees. And then we had an idea. Since we have all the pools in the garden, and since in the pools they have many layers of plaster that they put on the pools that the water will stay there, we just started to take layer after layer of this plaster. We could date them, and we took out the pollen that was trapped in the pollen when the plaster was still soft. And we discovered that in these Assyrian and then Persian gardens, we have different plants, which are usual vines and myrtles, which is very nice for gardens. The smell of it is very nice. But we had also trees that never grew up in the hill because they need a lot of water, like poplar, like willow, like, figs is usual, water lilies, of course, but where can you find in Jerusalem? Water lilies. But then we found the walnut, which is the first time that we have tree that came from Persia as the walnut. And it bloomed in the garden of Ramat Rachel because we found the pollen. But not only the walnut, but also the cedar that came from Lebanon. And some other trees, but then we found what we really dreamed to find, and this is the citron. And the citron is coming from the Indus Valley. It's the first time that citron came to the Middle East at all. And this is the citron that was blooming in Ramat Rachel, and probably more than a third, nearly half of the pollen that we found was of citron. Now, citron is becoming etrog, yes? Etrog is the turung, is the Persian name. It's becoming very, very soon one of the most important trees in Judaism because it's one of the 4 kinds in Sukkot, in tabernacles. It couldn't be one of the 4 kinds before actually citron was in Ramat Rachel and became a tree that everybody has it. So this citron is bringing us a lot of information about the importance of the garden, importance of Ramat Rachel, importance of the Assyrian and Persian presence in the place. Think about it because I'm moving, with these conclusions, I'm moving to another site just near Ramat Rachel, and this is the Rephaim Valley itself around. Because as I told you, Ramat Rachel is above this very important valley. This is one of the only places that can be used for agriculture. And then when Ramat Rachel was existed, we see a dramatic change in what happened in all the area around it in the Rephaim Valley. Because what we have is many industrial elements to take the liquids from the grapes and the olives. But what we have especially is a new phenomenon of rugium. Rugium is a huge, not natural mound, full of stone that people put inside it as a mound. And you can see it's a huge thing. And we have 17 of these things that were built around the Rephaim Valley, where they have all kinds of royal estates to produce these liquids for the kings in Jerusalem. Now, all these places located in a straight eye contact from Ramat Rachel. So from Ramat Rachel, you can see each one of them, but you cannot see from everyone, you can see only the next one. And this is something that we excavated and other excavated. We could see how it is, 17 of these. You can see that it's all artificial. People put stones, sometimes 15 meters high. This is a section of one of the excavations. You can see the different elements in it, never mind now. So this is one element around the Rephaim Valley with 17 of these, but beside it, they also created tunnels that went into the land to collect the water. It's not springs, it's artificial springs that people cut, and this is Assyrian system that we know it from Sennacherib, for example. So they cut the tunnels in the ground to get to the water, and then the water came out in these tunnels. And these tunnels can be 200, 300 meters long. And today we can get to some of them by far. And in the entrance of these tunnels, you have proto-aeolic symbol. So this is part of the Ramat Rachel, the Assyrian system. You see me entering to one of these. It's not easy. You should go inside this very narrow entrance. But this is a symbol of the beginning of every one of them, this proto-aeolic capital. We know some of these tunnels now, and in all of them you have this proto-aeolic capital symbol in the entrance. Even you see the other one here, a small part, but this is it. And these tunnels are leading water to the royal gardens that were developed during this 7th century, the time of the Assyrian presence in the land near Ramat Rachel. I think that it's not only to improve the agricultural product, but also to show power, to show, the Assyrian presence in these places. And the water, garden, are very important thing in the Assyrian tradition. Near Ramat Rachel, we have some other guarding places. We excavated these guarding areas around Ramat Rachel, but then we had a surprise. Because of the American embassy, we had to excavate a place called Mordot Arnona, which is very close to Ramat Rachel. You see here the ancient Jerusalem. You can see here Ramat Rachel. You can see here the American embassy. And on the way to this American embassy, by chance, we decided we had to start excavating it as salvage excavation. And we're talking about the biggest tumuli, the biggest stone pile that we have in the region, that we knew it because you cannot not see it. But when we started to excavate it, we discovered another administrative structure that was built on this mound during the time of King Manasseh's reign. And in this place, We have, again, a monument that was built showing power, showing control over the region, controlling the agricultural product, because it's not only that we have all these, never mind, all this period in this place, but the important thing is the time that it was built, in the time of King Manasseh, and with so many stamp impressions on jar handles. Again, hundreds of them. So it's not only Ramat Rachel, it's only this structure that demonstrate, the many jars that were collected to this place, again, to pay taxes, to be able to pay the money to the Assyrian rule. And we have all the different stages and all the different controls that are not important now, but it was such an important structure. So, present in the view around Jerusalem, that people can see it from Jerusalem, people can see the presence of it in Jerusalem. And I will not go to all the details, all the walls and different things, but you can see how much work was invested here on this monumental structure and in all what we have here. And this is another indication for what happened in Jerusalem, in the area of Jerusalem during the Assyrian time. And again, I will not go into details and everything, but I will just jump to another structure that was built, that was discovered, again, by chance. If this is the city of David here, and if this is Ramat Rachel Mordot Arnona, this is Armon HaNatziv. Armon HaNatziv is the ridge just above the city of David. Everyone can see it from the city of David. And here again, by chance, an amazing villa of a very rich person that didn't live in Jerusalem, lived just above Jerusalem. And again, we should start thinking, who is it, this guy? And he built a house with many window balustrades in the shape of Proto-Eli capitals, dozens of them. We found his toilet, and a private toilet in the garden, which is, again, something very rare in this time. So we could excavate and see all the parasites that even rich people in the biblical time had in their stomach. And this is why we have a lot of pollen of all kinds of herbs that people drink, in order maybe to deal with these parasites, but many dead parasites were in this toilet. You can see here the seat of the toilet, see? And under it, many remains of different things, including parasites. So archaeology is also a shitty thing in some aspects. And a garden. And in this garden, again, from the same time, we found different things that are not part of the usual vegetation that we have in the area of Jerusalem. Again, including the walnut, Persian walnut, including the chestnut, and including many different things that are not supposed to be there. So again, a villa above Jerusalem with an amazing garden. And again, I will not talk about how it connects to the King Manasseh, that he was the first king to be buried in the garden of Uzzah and not in the city of David itself. So everything is connected very well. And of course, the toilet that was there. And from this house, you could see Jerusalem. You can actually see everyone who is moving in Jerusalem. You can see the Temple Mount. So it's something even a little bit annoying maybe to people who lived in Jerusalem, waking up every morning, seeing this person living here, and outside the reach of the king who is living in Jerusalem. Again, someone has power over the king of Jerusalem. Someone could live above Jerusalem, something that didn't happen since then, since the Assyrian presence in this time. No one could do it before. And with all these Proto-Eli capitals that were found in this villa with all the beautiful finds, the windows, and everything was colored. You see still remains of red color on, so don't see the stones as stones. Everything was covered with colors. And you see these window balustrades. And then we discovered maybe the most important thing that happened also inside Jerusalem, not only around it, because in the excavations that you can see here just below the Temple Mount, that carried out by Tel Aviv University and the Israel Antiquity Authority for many years now, a structure was found from the 7th century, from this time of King Manasseh, that had two stories. In the upper part, you have the luxury area, and in the lower part, you have the storages and the industrial area. This building was destroyed in the Babylonian destruction, so we have some paleomagnetic studies of what was the paleomagnetic situation in the 9th of Ab in 586 BC. So we have the destruction of this building. But this building is a unique building because it was of high quality, with amazing finds that were found in it, architectural elements, different architectural elements that are really unique. Proto-Eli capital that was found there, the one in Jerusalem itself. They use ashlar stones, they use different elements, and especially they have a huge floor that was built above this basement in order to have a very nice second floor, and you can see how it collapsed in the destruction of the Babylonian time. And it's really amazing quality of floor that hold, And in this structure, we had amazing finds indicating who lived in this place and what was the status of this person that we actually have, his personal names on the stamp seals and stamp impression that were here, the bullets. And we have the burning wooden furniture that were in this building. And when we found it, we were waiting to see what can be joined to these burning furnitures, because usually in high quality furnitures, you have not only the wooden furnitures, but you have the ivory that covered them. And in this building, inside the destruction layer, we found hundreds of ivory pieces that were part of these furniture that were here. So this is the first reconstruction of these furniture that were covered with ivories, and you can see here how it could look like on this thing. And it's part of what we have in the upper floor. And this is what we have how we found it in the burning floor. You can see how it was there. And then we started to collect, all in all, 1,521 pieces. And we collect them, and we sorted them, and we started to combine them. And we can see all the different elements that were here. Many of them were with the rosette, and you can see also the rosette from the same time in the stamp impression from the time of Josiah. So they like this rosette symbol, but some of them are with a lotus flower, Egyptian style. And this is how we know it also from Assyrian furnitures. You can see here the Assyrian furnitures with the same ivories, with the same style, with the same decoration. So it was really nice. This is from the time of King Ashurbanipal from the 7th century in Assyria, with the same style, with the same thing But not only this, people who lived in this house had a very good diet. We found the bones not only of sheep and goat that we can say, and also cows, but only the good parts. So people in here, they didn't get the complete animal. They got only the good parts of the animal. Also, they had many fish bones. So I don't know if you've been in Jerusalem, but there is no sea in Jerusalem. So people could get fish from the Nile in Egypt, from the Mediterranean coast. People had money and they wanted to eat good in this time. But one of the most important things is the wine cellar that we have in the basement. Because in this wine cellar, we have not only dozens of jars with rosette stamp impressions on them, symbol of the king. And not only that we found them broken, but many of them, you can see how we found them with the rosette stamp impression on them, but we could do residue analysis and check what they contain. And this is the first time that we found, and we published it, as you can see now here, that people in this time put vanilla in the wine. Now again, in Jerusalem, in Judah, in Israel, you don't have vanillin. It's coming from it's coming from the Far East. So people had the money to pay in order to bring herbs and other things to add to the food and to the wine and to create an amazing diet and high quality. And of course, we have the people themselves. And you can see here the name of people that we know from the Bible, and we know the title. Netan Melech Eved HaMelech. This guy who was a prime minister in Judah. Eved HaMelech, the servant of the king. This is the highest minister living in Jerusalem, and this was his house, very close to the temple, very close to the palace of the king. And see how quality they have in this time of the Pax Assyriaca, how Judah could enjoy this period and the presence of the Assyrians and the commerce that was in this time. So, the massive development process that took place in the entire area south of Jerusalem, the exceptional royal estates, increased agricultural production, the construction of prominent and magnificent administrative and elite structures in the landscape associated with the collection of agricultural products from all around Jerusalem, was the outcome of the presence of the Assyrian Empire and the need of Judah to improve the agricultural production and to pay heavy taxes. So Judah was under Assyrian rule. The elite, the priests, the elite tried to ignore them in order to continue to live and to do the cult and to develop their own rituals in the city, and the Assyrians were wise enough to let them do it as long as they were loyal. And what we can see from archaeology is that the biblical description and the people who wrote the Bible try to ignore the Assyrian presence, even if they were part of it. But archaeology is letting us understanding how important was this presence of the Assyrians in and near Jerusalem during this time. Thank you very much.
Thank you, Dr. Lipschits, for a very, very illuminating lecture. We have some time for questions, and if you're interested in asking a question, please raise your hand, and I'm happy to bring the mic to you so you can ask it of Professor Lipschits. Dr. Edgar?
Thanks. Thanks very much, Professor. I guess this is very loud, sorry. I would just say, I guess, a few things. First, very, very impressed. I'm a alumni of Tel Aviv University from many years back, but I'm very impressed with what you all have been doing over the past decade or two, especially with respect to truly interdisciplinary research, right? You bring in not just archaeologists, but people who can discern pollen and everything else, scientists. And this is really fantastic work. My question to you is, what do you think you have learned about, you talked about sort of the three pillars of history, the text, or the biblical texts, other texts, and archaeology. Do you think that the biblical texts or other texts can shade some of what you have found archaeologically? And for example, what I mean is, or one of the things I could mean is, while we can see that Assyria had a real prominent presence, it doesn't necessarily tell you day to day what that influence precisely was, right? What years were they getting along? What years was there tension? What years were they paying a lot or they hold back, et cetera? Can you discuss that a little bit?
I think, in the end of, or next week, Jonathan and me are going to a conference in Denver of the Society of Biblical Literature, when 1,200 scholars from all over the world, biblical scholars mainly, coming there. And one of the things that I see in the last years is the influence of these finds on biblical studies. Because suddenly, people are coming with this knowledge, and this is what we want to do. This is what we encourage people to do. People are coming with the knowledge that archaeology is, this is what I'm talking about, a mirror that we put. And people are coming back to the text and starting to ask questions on the text itself, biblical scholars. And suddenly there is a book that's just suggesting that certain chapters in the book of Isaiah were written in Ramat Rachel, not in Jerusalem. And some other texts are celebrating the, not destruction, but a short period when the Assyrian left and the Egyptian didn't come and the Babylonians still were not there, and probably Ramat Rachel was deserted for a certain period, and some texts might reflect this very small period. And then some people are, so archaeology should always be with connection to biblical studies. In many cases, biblical studies are illuminate and raising questions that archaeology can give answers. In many aspects, archaeology will put kind of a mirror and then biblical studies will go. But again, as long as you are not trying to force one or the other, but it's two different disciplines, I nearly don't care what conclusions people will get. I think that we should add more information, we should add more questions, we should let other scholars a lot of points to raise other studies. But I think that this is what we are trying to do with all the sciences that we are operating, with all the information that we are putting. You know, I'll give you an example, just an example for this. We are now collecting, in the last 20 years, we are collecting all the bones that we find in excavation. And we are sifting, so I'm talking about tens of thousands of animal bones all the time. And of course, we check them, and we have people who are experienced in this thing. And we check, for example, kosher, not kosher. So we can see that all over Judah, usually people ate sheep, goat, cows, kosher animals. But you always have 1-2% of pig bones. So if you know, if there was a pig in the area, so okay. So we can have the question of these kosher laws, but we also collect fish bones, as you saw. And we see that in all periods, about a third of the bones, of the fish bones, are of not kosher fish. That, according to biblical law, are not kosher. Now, it's not 1%, it's 30%. So what comes? So we can come back to the biblical law and think, if this part of the fish bone, since again, Judah was not with maritime commerce, so maybe these fish bone laws of the diet laws in the Bible were added later. And suddenly we have now a book of biblical scholar who's saying, okay, this is an addition to the diet laws in the Pentateuch that was added later as an addition, because then they knew and so this is what I'm aiming. So the knowledge of archaeology, history, what we're trying to do can always come back with questions that people didn't think before. And I think that this is the importance of what we're doing. Again, I don't care about reconstructions. People can go back. For example, every place that I'm excavating, this is something that all of us in Tel Aviv are doing, we are trying to excavate maximum 1/3 of every area that we excavate in order to let 2/3, we try, not always we, but that people in the future can go and excavate 2/3 more than what we are doing in order to check. Now, we know that now we have much more information from every bucket of soil that we are excavating than 20 years ago. We have all the option to check things much more careful. And I'm sure that my students in 20 years will say, oh, these old guys, they knew nothing. We have much more information from every bucket. So we leave, at least for 2 more generations, to excavate the same places that we are excavating, even if in some cases it's very tempting to continue and to find nice things that you have. So we are trying to put the question, to put the data, to encourage people. And again, our conclusions are conclusions, and I'll be happy if they will be changed in the future.
Other questions, please? Yeah.
Thank you for a very interesting lecture. If it really is the case that there was an Assyrian administrative presence consistently throughout the 7th century and so close to Jerusalem, that is very, very significant.
Yeah, but it's not unique to Judah. The Assyrians did it in every vassal kingdom in the world.
So my question goes back to the Bible then. Scholars typically date the reforms of Josiah to the late 7th century, and some people place the writing of much of Deuteronomy in the reign of Josiah. So can you help us maybe reimagine what it meant for Josiah to enact these particular reforms if there is an Assyrian administrative presence right next door?
Well, one of the nice things is what you're asking is that when you combine the history and the archaeology with the biblical material, you suddenly understand why Josiah, listen, Josiah became a king when he was 8. The cultic reform that he made was in his 18th year, so he was 26. What happened? He became a tzaddik suddenly? No. Exactly in this time, the Assyrian Empire collapsed. And we still see that around 628, 627 BCE, Assyria was still strong and dominant. After 5 years, Assyria was not here anymore. was not in the Levant anymore. It collapsed in an unbelievable fast process. So I think that the disappearance of the Assyrian Empire from the area was the key, was the pushing factor for the Josiah cultic reform, because it was not only cultic reform, it was a national reform. It was cultic reform with a lot of national thoughts around it. This is why the 13 years later, when Egyptians came to rule in the area, they killed Josiah. The Egyptian killed him probably because he was too active, too national, with this reform, and they put one of his sons as a king when he was loyal to them. So again, I think that the connection between the archaeology, the inscription that lead us, this was my first book that I wrote after my PhD, The Fall and Rise of Jerusalem. I published it with Eisenbrauns, trying to analyze this connection of the last phase of the history of Judah before the destruction and a little bit after the destruction. So again, this is what let us understand the world of the Bible. And if we don't know exactly everything that is going on, it's a long process, we are much in a better position to understand the world of the biblical time when we understand, the connection between archaeology, history, and the biblical material. Thank you for the question.
Hi, thank you. You mentioned in passing the new geomagnetic studies, and I was wondering if you could talk a little bit more and what we can learn from them.
Hoping for such a question. Well, magnetism is one of the phenomena in physics that Albert Einstein, talked about the 5 main questions in physics. This was one of them, because people are measuring the magnetism in the world in the last 120 years, and they see radical changes. The intensity of magnetism is going from 140 to 30 in rapid change, and the complete north, the direction, is moving. So the north that we have is moving 2 or 3 degrees here and there, and people don't understand it. And this is a big question. Maybe 20 years ago, they started to measure it, and then one of the physicians who is dealing with magnetism spoke, and told us that, we know one thing, that when something was burned in more than 800 Celsius, I don't know Fahrenheit, 800, it's a lot, and then it's cooling, so it's freezing its magnetic characteristics. So we know to have the how much was it in this time, and if no one moved it, for example, a wall of mud brick that were burned, and no one touched it, so they can even check not only the intensity that we can check in every piece of pottery, but also the direction. So we decided to start having a project that is going on now in the only lab that we have in Israel, in the Hebrew University, with Ron Shar. This is a leading physician who is doing it, but with us as archaeologists, because I told him, listen, we archaeologists, we can give you a lot of material that we know the date of them. We know the date of the destruction by Sennacherib in 701. We know the date of the destruction of Nebuchadnezzar 586. We know the destruction in we can give you a whole set of destruction. We'll give you the date. You will give that the intensity, and we'll build a graph. And we started, now 10 years, we published some papers, on these things. I gave them all my stamp impressions, the research. I showed you the stamp impression. I can date, this is my book with David van der Hooft. We can date the stamp impressions. The book that I published now on it is called The Age of Empires. So, and I'm trying to speak in this book about the administration of the taxes under the empires during 600 years and we can give every 20, 30 years, different family of stamp impressions of pottery that was burned in kiln. So we can give you the dates. So now we have a graph of dates for more than 1,000 years with the intensity and the direction of the paleomagnetic. And we can see that in some cases it was more than 140, in some cases it was less than 25. So people, first of all, we made all the worried physicians relaxed, because they have theories that when the intensity of paleomagnetism will go down below 25, so north will exchange with south. And there will be many other problems. And so we show them that in the world, it's changed before, it's not now. My role is not only, I don't care about science, it's for the scientists. But my secret wish is that in the future, we can use this to date archaeological materials in a much easier way. So in every excavation, we'll have a microwave, kind, and every piece of pottery that we'll find, we can put in the microwave, and the microwave will tell us, this piece of clay has the intensity, paleomagnetic intensity of 701, or 586, or 820. So we'll be able to date with paleomagnetism archaeological finds. So it's, both sides are, so we just published two big papers that had a lot of echo in the public. One of them was the intensity of Jerusalem in 586, and the other was that we took 20 archaeologists, which is a miracle to put 20 archaeologists to do a paper together. And we took 20 different destruction layers, and we put the paleomagnetic intensity of all these layers. And now we started to use the paleomagnetic and go back, and if people couldn't differentiate between levels and sites that were destroyed by Pharaoh Shishak in 920, or by Hazael, king of Aram Damascus, in 830, or by the Assyrians. Now we compared all these layers and we came back with answers. And this is a nice paper. So paleomagnetic is unbelievable, interesting field of research. But as I told Jonathan today, it's not the most interesting, because I can tell you, I'm afraid that you will not ask, or I'll tell you, that nowadays we even have research combining archaeology and cosmic ray. You know, muons that are falling from the sky. And we are trying to find tunnels and channels in archaeological sites using inspector of cosmic ray. And again, we have interest for the physicians who are doing it. We have our interest to find all kinds of tunnel channels and underground holes. And this is the fun thing with archaeology. We can share our knowledge, we can share our sites with scientists from all over, and I show you now how we do residue analysis. So we find in grave that people use cocaine, and people use marijuana, and people, because we find it in our work. And we find the vanillin in the wine, and we have animal bones, and we have pollen. So all this is a fantastic range of studies that at the end, all of them are serving archaeology, but they have other purposes that can be used also for the science. Thank you for the question.
Great. We've got another question right here.
Thanks. My question is essentially, what is this going to be telling us about center-periphery relations? In center-periphery relations, that we're seeing this influence and also these kind of imagery and artistry that we're seeing coming from Assyria, but at Ramat Rachel. And what are we looking at in terms of, are they bringing in anybody that is from Assyria there to help instruct local artisans on how they're doing it? I'm assuming, is it corvée labor that's drawn from there in and around Jerusalem? And where are you going in terms of that, of the influence that you have from the center, from
This is a great question, and I'm sure that I'll be able to answer it now. But what I can tell you is that as long as vassal, okay, I'll split it. In some cases, the Assyrians came and destroyed kingdoms, turned them into provinces, so with direct rule of the Assyrians. So they took Assyrian administrators to rule in these areas. And in these cases, all the Assyrians wanted to suck everything that they could from the territory. Also, the administrator came there for a few years. He wanted to get as much as he can. So they didn't try to develop anything in these provinces. But with the vassal kingdoms like Judah, like the kingdom of Ammon, Moab, Edom, or the Phoenician kingdom of the West, Assyria pushed them to develop commerce, to develop the agriculture, to develop not because they wanted to develop, that they will develop. They wanted more money. They wanted more taxes. So they pushed all the region to develop But in most cases, they didn't interfere in what they are doing. So for example, when Judah is starting to develop the economy and administration, under Assyrian pressure, they use hieratic numbers coming from Egypt. The Assyrian doesn't care as long as it's standard, as long as it's under control, use whatever you want. They didn't use only the numbers, but they use also the weights that they took the system from the Egyptian side. They used the symbols of the scarab that they took from the Egyptian side. So the Assyrian didn't force, not religion, not administration, not the script. They didn't care about these peripheries as long as they were loyal and paid taxes. That's it. So I think that what they did, and again, in all the vassal kingdom, they used a very small force. In these places like Ramat Rachel, I visited, for example, the sister of Ramat Rachel that was built just near the capital of Moab. The same, I could show you some pictures from there, with Port Royal capitals, with the same structure, with the same function. So they built the same place near the capital of Moab. They have the same place near the capital of Ammon, the Ammonite kingdom, in order to use minimum power for maximum profit. And always the Assyrian always had this, and it's fantastic to watch and to see how the Assyrians are dealing, even every time that the local kingdom didn't pay taxes, for example. So the Assyrian had two options, either to come with an army and to take it by force, or to start negotiate. Now you always see, to bring a big army to conquer Ashkelon or Gaza, it costs a lot of money. You will win at the end, you will get what you want, but is it really necessary? So you have the kind of negotiation. I think that it was more like a strike, of the workers. So they want something, they want negotiation. You can break them, but you can negotiate. So we have, for example, a text that was sent from Gaza to the Assyrian king, saying, listen, I know that you wanted this certain amount of ivories, but ivories are not coming this year from Africa. What can I do? So the answer, this year you will pay me, the Assyrian king is saying, twice as much as gold, and next year twice as much as ivories. So this is all, and when the king of Ashkelon is saying, listen, the king of Assyria, I cannot pay you so much taxes as you want. So it's a kind of a call for negotiation. And I can see how the Assyrians try with a minimum power to gain the most they can. So it's wonderful to see how it works. It's wonderful to see these Assyrian, small posts near the capital in order to inspect what's going on. And again, Judah is nothing. Judah is $200,000 per year. Think what is this post near the harbor of Gaza, that all the Arab trade is coming there. What is this post near the Phoenician, cities in the north with all the richness, it's coming there. This is the big money, not in Judah, which is nothing. So it's fantastic to use archaeology and to try to kind of see how it all worked during these periods. Thank you.
Are the excavations that you showed us the closest that you've gotten to the Temple Mount area? And is it just too political to dig below the Temple Mount area?
Well, no one will dare excavating in this sensitive place of the Temple Mount and the area in Jerusalem. Politically, it's not easy. Tel Aviv University will never excavate against international laws. And it's forbidden to excavate in occupied territories, never mind how you think about what you think about what is occupied and what is not. But Jerusalem, even according to the international law, is not occupied territory. So this is the only reason why we excavate there. We'll not excavate any step beyond the green line of the international border of Israel. Again, never mind what political, opinion we have. But the holy area around the Temple Mount was declared by the United Nations in 1947 as a separate international territory. Not Jordanian, not Palestinian, not Israeli. It was conquered by the Jordanian in 1948. It was conquered by Israel in 1967. And the only reason that we are excavating over there is that it's legal. It's maybe the pearl on the crown of archaeology. So we have to know what's going on there. And as long as it's legal, we can do it, but again, we will never excavate as Tel Aviv University in tunnels under Palestinian houses. We will not excavate in any way that is not legal and appropriate from the archaeological perspective. And of course, no one can excavate below the Temple Mount because no one can do it. So, and no one will do it, I hope. So it's very sensitive. We're trying to be as balanced as we can. We're trying to be as open as we can. In the ASO conference in Boston next week, we have a session on our excavations in Jerusalem, which is, again, recognized by the archaeological community. It's problematic, but it's still legal. So, yeah, this is the answer that I can give you about this.
One last question from the back.
Thank you very much. I was curious about the Proto-Aeolic capitals. You mentioned that they are they're a sign, a signifier of Assyrian spread, and I was wondering if the Proto-Aeolic capital was original to the Assyrian Empire, like if the Assyrians made it, or if there are prototypes from earlier periods, and also if they are the progenitors of capitals in the Ionic order of Greek architecture.
Well, since I wrote a big paper on this, so I can give you a summary of this. The first ever Proto-Aeolic capitals appear in the 9th century Kingdom of Israel. This is what we call the Omrides architecture. It was an invention by the Israeli kings. First time ever in the world, it's appeared in the big centers that the king of Omri and Ahab built in Samaria, Megiddo, Chatzor, Jezreel. We even found similar thing in other structure that belongs to this 9th century Omride kingdom. They call it Proto-Aeolic or Proto-Ionic because people first know about it from the Aeolic and Ionic, Greek architecture. So suddenly they understood that you have something that this thing. This is the 9th century. And then, according to my view, again, I wrote about this, suddenly we have these capitals in the fortified small places that were built when Judah was under Assyrian rule. And we have it not only in Judah, as I told you, we have it in the sister of Ramat Rachel in Moab, we have it in Ammon, in this small citadel. So it's clearly that there is a kind of Assyrian connection. I was so happy to find the connection because the connection is that we found these capitals in the palaces of the Assyrian kings that destroy Israel and control Judah. So what I think, now these are the facts. We have it Israel, we have it Judah, in the middle we have it in Assyria for a very short period of 20, 30 years. So the way I reconstructed it is that the Assyrians loved to imitate and to take things from the kingdom that they controlled. We know it from all the history. So for them to take elements from Syria that they conquered and to put them in their own palaces, it was a symbol of how strong we are. So the way I reconstruct it is that when the Assyrian kings destroyed the cities of the kingdom of Israel in 730 and 720, they saw these Proto-Aeolic capitals. They were so impressed by them that they took them and built some of the palaces of the Assyrian king in Assyria in this time with these Proto-Aeolic capitals. Now, for the Assyrians, it's a big change because Assyrians never used columns or capitals. It's not part of them. So they built palaces or part of the palaces with columns and capitals near the garden, as I saw it before. And then when they conquered when they made Judah and the other kingdoms, small kingdom in the region, as a vassal kingdoms, and they built these outposts, these small Assyrian centers, I think that they ordered to the local kings in every place of these small places, Proto-Aeolic capital would symbolize our control. So you find it in Ramat Rachel, you find it in this small post in Moab, in Ammon, and now we have also 2 or 3 of them inside Jerusalem even, which is a big question. But this is the way I reconstructed because you don't have it before, you don't have it after. Afterwards you have it in the Phoenician states and then it's coming to Greece. But this is much later, in the 6th, 5th centuries. So 9th century Israel, late 8th, early 7th century Assyria, and then it's coming to Judah and the kingdoms around it, and then it's going by definition to the other world, kind of part of the world. I have a paper on it. You can see it in my academia website.
Well, with that, we will please join me in giving a big round of thanks to Professor Lipschits for a wonderful lecture and evening. Thank you for being here for this Gale Family Foundation Fall Lecture. We look forward to seeing you again. And if you're interested in more events at the Schusterman Center, please check out our website. Thank you and have a good night.